Alright, next we're going to replace the O-ring washers for the coolant cross pipe up here. There's two of them, one on this side, one on this side. So when you're doing a head gasket and you have the engine all tore apart, I highly recommend replacing these, especially if you don't know the age of them. So these are 10 millimeters, and you want to be careful when busting these loose. I already busted them loose off camera, but these can be quite stuck on, so you want to be extra careful when trying to loosen these, because you can easily snap these bolts off. I have never had it occur, but I know others have, so you want to take caution when removing these. These are long studs. Once they're busted loose, they're pretty easy just to thread out by hand. Here's what I mean. See, it's just a long screw stud here, and they can snap off right up here. Yeah, so you just want to be extra cautious when removing this coolant cross pipe. And I've had an engine where I did a lot of work to it, my personal engine. I put it back in my car after having it all torn apart like this one. I didn't replace these because at the time I didn't know. And a couple months later, I was leaking coolant at the top of my engine block. So if you see coolant leaking on yours, this is probably where it's coming from. Some people might assume that's the upper head gasket right here that's leaking. But most of the time, it'll be one of these gaskets, O-rings. Yep. If I had a power tool, this would make it a whole lot easier to zip this out. And with that, the pipe should just pop right off. Like that. Easy enough. Oh, wow. How convenient. Never had that happen. The O-ring came out with the pipe. That makes it a whole lot easier. Unfortunately, the other one didn't. It's going to be fun to try to fish that out of there. What's nice is this one still has a nice rubber consistency, but you can definitely tell it's old because it's a little firmer. It's a little squished, so it's good to replace this. I have replaced them like in the engine I was just talking about, where it comes out as a hard plastic, where it's just brittle and done. These can be fun to fish out if it's hard plastic. Usually I'll just jab it, poke a hole in it. I'm going to see if I can use this small Phillips screwdriver to extract it here. Let's see if I can get underneath it. Oh, and you want to be careful not to scratch the sides too. And there we go, got it. Or maybe not, it fell back in. There we go. That's probably the easiest one I've ever extracted. Usually they're stuck in there, and if they're hard plastic, they're kind of a pain. Yeah, so you can look down in there. That's the side of the cylinder wall in there. So just clean this surface up, clean where the new O-ring gasket's going to go in these surfaces. And then you'll also want to clean, of course, the surface here where it's going to be mating with the cross pipe. What I'm going to do next isn't necessary, but I'm going to just clean up the pipe a bit, make it look better, get some of that corrosion off. I'm going to remove the sensor because whoever put it in here, I don't like the orientation, and I'm going to clean it off because sometimes the sensor gets a little corroded. So, and then I'll reseal it. Usually the people use a threading tape. You don't have to. I've gone without using threading tape, and I've never had a leak, but if you're afraid it's going to leak, throw some threading tape on there. But I'm going to remove it, straighten out the sensor, clean off the sensor. If you want, you can replace the sensor, but I mean, that'd probably be the best thing to do. And now, got the new O-rings. See how round they are? That's how they're supposed to be. You just carefully drop them in there. Make sure they're actually in. You have to kind of squish them in there a bit. Get them to stay. You'll know they're in there. They'll be squished up against this outer edge here. So there'll be a little bit of a gap on the inner wall. That's what you want. So just give a nice press. Make sure it's in there evenly and not crooked. This one's good. You'll feel it want to pinch out a little bit as you press it in, and just work it, and then eventually you'll feel it pop. And there we go. They're both in there. Now we're ready to put the pipe on. And gently just set it down on top. So this pipe has a flat surface, so it's not going to sit until you put the bolts on. So you don't want to. You want to be careful not to mess up the O-ring when you're doing this, because it has to remain seated. It's not too difficult. Just going to get that one started there. Actually, okay, with them both seated, carefully drop this down. I like to get these bolts started so I know where I'm lining up at. Like so. For the other one. Now this pipe has a flat surface on the side, so it's not going to sit until you start screwing this in, because as you screw it in, the pressure is going to squish that O-ring, those O-ring gaskets, and that's what's going to make the seal. So I'm just going to get these somewhat tight, and then we'll do the correct torque sequence on them. Alright, it's time to torque these down. You want to be careful when you do this, obviously. You don't want to strip or snap these bolts. So, I believe these torque specs should be the same on all Subaru engines, because the design of the engine hasn't changed in years with this coolant crosspipe and just the engine in general. So, online manual for a 2010 said 4.7 foot-pounds for these bolts, which is about 56.4 inch-pounds. So I'm just going to do 56 inch-pounds, and we'll call that good. And I'm going to try to do this in a certain pattern here, so it's even pressure. So I'm going to come over here now. That one's actually pretty tight already. Do that. There we go. So I'm just doing this until they all feel decently tight, and then I'll give them the final torque. That one's good. That one's good. That's good. That one's good. Alright. Now for the final torque of 56 inch-pounds here. So I'll go ahead and do this one first. Right there. That one. There's that one. And there's that one. Now I'm going to repeat. Good. 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 And good. And there we go. And you can check along these edges, make sure the gasket didn't slip out and the squishing. I've never had that happen. It looks like it's all good. So there we go. Is how you replace the O-ring gasket for the coolant crossover pipe.